part of my final year project, I've designed and manufactured my own wrist stabiliser. If we take a look at a normal banjo here, we have an armrest. Now, the armrest is really only designed to stop the player dampening the sound on the banjo itself. This skin here, you don't want to be touching off this skin. So, I suppose I'm learning the banjo now with 3 to 4 years, and when I started learning, I never developed this wrist movement, so my hand would have been moving the whole time, up and down. Now, it might be very slight, you mightn't even see it, but more professional players would definitely see it. And I suppose in the last year I've started learning this wrist movement properly. Now, it's taken me a long time because there's so many other factors, like you're playing the tune as well. So trying to develop this movement while trying to do something up here was very tricky. So it took me over a year to do it. And obviously I'm building, this is my own banjo that I built for my FYP, and I started questioning, is there anything else I could design that would make this movement become easier? So when I started playing the banjo, I had to go through this conscious state where I was thinking about the wrist movement. So not alone was I thinking of a tune up here, I was trying to think of my arm movement down here, this wrist movement. So in my head it was going through, is my arm moving, is my wrist moving? So it was very tricky. So when I started questioning this wrist movement, I started thinking, is there any way I could do this subconsciously? Could I design something and manufacture something that would allow the player to still play the tune up here, but at the same time be developing the wrist movement without thinking about it, because there's so much going on anyway. So I came up with the wrist stabiliser. Later on you'll see my video on the wrist stabiliser. I've got a participant to try out my wrist stabiliser to see if it works. So basically the whole idea of it is that you will put your arm into this wrist stabiliser and it will automatically stop the arm movement and only allow the wrist to move. Not alone that, but I've said, I suppose if, for example, I might have started playing the banjo up here like this, but you're automatically leaning with the banjo. So I've been given advice that the banjo should normally be around this height up, and you don't want it too low either because you'll be leaning the other way, and it's obviously bad for your shoulders. Not alone that, but you don't want the banjo in too far because your arm is coming around it, and that can be very bad for this shoulder. So the banjo has to be as such out a certain tilt from your body and up a certain tilt. And when I designed this wrist stabiliser, I kept both of them in mind. You'll see that later on when the participant says that he's quite happy with how the banjo is held out and held up for him at the same time by the wrist stabiliser, and it also helps the wrist movement.
It makes me hold the banjo in the correct position.
Yeah.
You know, it's the banjo is, you know, you're running up, you know, the right angle.
Yeah.
Slightly tilted out.
Right.
You know, and
how is that happening? Like.
Just the way your wrist fits into it.
Yeah.
You know, if you you can't put the banjo down on that and put your wrist into that properly, like.
Okay.
You know, so you have to have it at the correct angle for the stabilizer, I would say. You know, and there's a slight, as I say, there's a slight tilt out in it, and there's a slight tilt up in it.
Right.
And it's probably the most comfortable position to hold the banjo in for me. And probably if you see any of the banjo players playing like this is the way they would be holding the banjo. Like, when you have your wrist positioned in the stabilizer, you can't do the moving. Your hand, you know.
Okay.
Your hand is doing, well, your wrist is doing the moving, but your arm is fixed in place. You know?
Okay. Right.
So this is the kind of movement you get off it.
Right.
You know,
Do you think that's a good thing?
I would say so, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like it's not a guitar you're going to be playing.
Exactly.
You're
Yeah.
not going to be doing big movements, you know.
Yeah.
So me, like I can play the banjo for longer, I suppose.
Yeah.
Because for the comfort, would say.
Right. So you find it comfortable anyway, do you?
Comfortable, yeah.
Right.
I like that part of it, and you know, there's no strain in this hand lifting the banjo.
Okay.
And you can just concentrate on your notes with this hand.
Right.
You're not lifting, you know, and your hand can slide easier on the banjo.
Right. Yeah.
And getting
That movement.
this
Yeah.
movement, you know, you're
Probably.
concentrating on this, whereas before your hand could kind of wander, or you know, I find the banjo would be slipping out of my hand before maybe.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay.
Whereas this is stabilizing the banjo, you know.
Yeah.
Into me, like.
Right.
And, makes it
Just the last little thing, just maybe on comfort. How would you find it, like in terms of before when you didn't have the stabilizer there? How was it comfortable without
no,
it?
it wasn't. Because
Right.
You see, this banjo, when your arm is kind of pressed in there,
Yeah.
these are kind of digging into your wrist a bit,
Okay. Right.
and it makes the banjo, you know, hard to hold and uncomfortable. Like,
Yeah.
you know. So
Right.
I don't think maybe every banjo isn't like this banjo, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas they don't have, but that definitely for beginners, you know, it's a big help. It does stick out a bit, you know. It's a bit. This is a bit, I suppose, a bit thick, like, you know.
Right.
And if you're kind of bringing your arm around, you know, when you're playing it, and it just makes it a bit harder.
Yeah.
like,
So you find your right hand there now is coming around a bit more.
around a bit too
Yeah.
much, you know.
Okay.
Whereas if you could, you would just be more comfortable if you could, you know, because you know, if you're playing for a long time or whatever, like,
Yeah.
you know, you could, so maybe if there was a bit of a curve off here, then as well, you know. It doesn't allow you to move your hand at all.
Right.
You know,
Okay.
you're stuck to it, and it's a great way of learning. You know,
Yeah.
when you're a learner, you know, to learn about the you know, how to hold it right. You know,
Mhm.
how to say, and it steadies the banjo up as well.